Mum, I think your husband. The voice broke on the other end of the line. Please, come now, before anyone sees. 3 days. Only 3 days had passed since I buried Robert beneath the ash tree in the family plot. I still carried the rosary in my pocket. I still felt the weight of the dirt they had shoveled onto his casket. And now Mr. Frank, the foreman of our ranch in Texas, was calling me with that trembling voice I had never heard in 25 years. My name is Ellen Stewart. I am 63 years old. And this is the story I kept for too long, because there are secrets that weigh heavier when the dead can no longer answer. I drove 2 hours to the ranch. My hands were shaking on the steering wheel. The dirt road seemed longer than ever. The scrub oak alongside the road looked grey under the January sun. When I arrived, Mr. Frank was waiting for me at the main gate, his cowboy hat held in his hands. Ma'am Ellen, forgive me. I didn't want to stick my nose where it doesn't belong, but I found something. He led me to the old stable, the one Robert had closed up more than 20 years ago. No one went in there. Not me. Not my son. Jim. No one. The wooden door groaned as Mr. Frank pushed it open. And then I saw it. The chest, that iron chest Robert always kept locked, the one he said held ranch papers and that must never, never be opened. It was open. And inside, documents. All signed the week before his death, deeds, notarized powers of attorney, letters. And on top, a sealed envelope with my name written in his handwriting. Open only in my absence. I felt the air leave my lungs. Because after 38 years of marriage, after raising our son together, after sharing our meals, our bed, and our silences, I discovered that my husband had been hiding something so important it could only be revealed once he was gone. I took the envelope with shaking hands, but before opening it, something else caught my attention. An old photograph, taped to the inside of the chest lid. A young, beautiful woman in a white lace dress. It wasn't me. And on the back, in faded ink, a date. August 15, 1976. 1 year before Robert and I met. There are moments in life where time stops. That instant in the stable was one of them. Mr. Frank stood silently behind me, breathing slowly, as if he understood he was witnessing something he shouldn't see. But it was too late. The chest was open, Robert's secrets, exposed under the dusty light streaming through the roof cracks. I put the photograph in the pocket of my black blazer, the same blazer I had worn to the funeral. It still smelled faintly of the church incense. Mr. Frank, I said without turning around, how did you find this? He cleared his throat. Well, ma'am, yesterday Mr. Montell, Mr. Robert's lawyer, came by. He said he needed to look over some ranch papers before the will was read. He asked me to open this stable. I told him I didn't have the key, that Mr. Robert never gave it to me. Then he took a key out of an envelope he was carrying and told me, Mr. Robert left this with me. Please open it yourself. I turned to look at him. And did Mr. Montell see what was inside? Mr. Frank shook his head, looking nervous. No, ma'am, I opened the door and he just glanced inside like he was looking for something. Then he said, this is no longer necessary. And he left. But I kept thinking, why did Mr. Robert seal this stable for so many years? What was here? I sighed. So you came back? Yes, ma'am, early this morning, and, well, I saw the chest. It was sitting there, open, as if someone had left it that way on purpose. On purpose? Those words hit me. Robert wasn't a careless man. Everything he did had a reason. If that chest was open, it was because he wanted me to find it. But not right away. Not on the day of his death, not during the funeral, but 3 days later. Just enough time for the initial pain to pass, just the right amount of time for me to think clearly. Or so he believed. I closed my eyes, and for a moment I went back to the good years, to when Robert and I were young. We met in 1977 at the State Fair in Nashville, Tennessee. I was 23 years old and working at my Aunt Rose's textile shop. He walked in one October afternoon, tall, distinguished, with that neat moustache that was in style then and a smile that lit up the whole place. "Do you sell good quality denim?" he asked me. "Yes," I replied shyly, "but the best pieces were bought this morning." "Then I'll wait for more to arrive," he said, and he sat down in a wicker chair next to the counter. And he waited, 3 hours, until my aunt closed the shop and said, laughing, "Young man, no more denim is coming until next week." Robert smiled. "I know, but I needed an excuse to stay." That night he invited me to have barbecue ribs at the market. We talked until dawn. He told me he was an agricultural engineer, that he had just inherited a ranch in Texas, that he dreamed of modernizing American farming while still honoring tradition. "I want my children to grow up knowing where they come from," he told me, "to touch the soil, to know the value of honest work." I fell in love that night, not with his words, but with the light in his eyes when he talked about the future. We got married 6 months later at the First Baptist Church of Nashville. My dress was simple, white cotton with lace from a local seamstress. Robert cried when he saw me walking toward the altar. "You are the most beautiful woman I have ever seen in my life," he whispered as Pastor Anselm blessed us. And I believed him. For years, I believed everything. We moved to the ranch in Texas, a beautiful property, surrounded by rolling hills, with fields of corn and an apple orchard that produced huge sweet fruit every fall. The main house was made of clapboard and brick, with a central patio full of purple wisteria. There was a stone fountain in the center, and in the afternoons I would sit there and knit while listening to the birds sing. Robert worked from sunup. He supervised the planting, fixed the fences, talked to the hands. He was a fair boss, respected, well-liked, and at night he came home tired but happy. We always ate dinner together: chicken noodle soup, baked potatoes, pot roast when there was a celebration. Afterward, we sat on the porch and watched the stars, holding hands, in silence. We didn't need words, or so I thought. 2 years after we married, Jim was born, a beautiful boy, with big eyes and an easy laugh. Robert carried him in his arms and walked him all over the ranch, teaching him the names of the trees, the cycle of the harvests, the sound of the wind before the rain. "This boy is going to be a good man," Robert would say proudly. "He's going to take care of this land when I'm gone." They were happy, quiet years, full of coffee in the mornings, fresh biscuits, Jim's laughter running through the rows, orange sunsets. But now, standing in front of that open chest, with the photograph of an unknown woman in my pocket, I realized something awful. Maybe that happiness was never complete. Maybe Robert was always hiding something, and I, too busy loving him, never stopped to ask. "Ma'am Ellen?" Mr. Frank's voice pulled me out of my thoughts. "Do you want me to leave, or do you need help with something?" I looked at him. He was an elderly man, nearly 70, who had worked on the ranch since before I arrived. He knew Robert better than anyone. "Mr. Frank," I asked slowly, "did you know Robert kept this chest here?" He lowered his gaze. "Yes, ma'am." My heart skipped a beat. "And you never told me anything?" "Mr. Robert asked me not to. He told me, 'Frank, this is something I need to resolve myself. I don't want Ellen to worry.' And I obeyed. I thought it was something about the ranch, Old papers, maybe debts. And the photograph? I insisted. Did you see it? Mr. Frank swallowed. No, ma'am. I never opened the chest. I swear that on my mother's grave. I believed him, because Mr. Frank was one of those men who don't lie, who keep secrets because they are asked to, but never out of malice. All right, I said, calmer. You can go. And please, don't tell anyone what you saw here. Not a word, ma'am. Not one. He left slowly, closing the door carefully. And I was left alone, with the sealed envelope in one hand, and 38 years of memories that suddenly I didn't know if they were real anymore. Sometimes we trust too much in those we love. We believe we know everything, that there are no secrets. But life always finds ways to show us that we never fully know anyone. Have you also been disappointed by someone you loved? Someone you thought you knew who turned out to be a stranger? Tell me your story in the comments. I want to read it. Because sometimes sharing the pain makes it lighter. I stayed alone in that stable for almost an hour. I couldn't move. I couldn't think clearly. The sealed envelope was still in my hand, intact. I didn't have the courage to open it yet, because a part of me knew that as soon as I broke that seal, my life would change forever. There are truths that cannot be unlearned. Once you know them, there is no turning back. I sat down on an old wooden bench propped against the wall. Dust rose when I settled in. It smelled of old hay, of time standing still. I took the photograph out of my blazer pocket and looked at it more closely. The woman was young, 20-something maybe. She had long, dark hair, gathered in an elegant updo with white flowers. The dress was fine lace, with long sleeves and a modest neckline. On her left hand, a ring glittered, an engagement ring. She looked happy, radiant, like a woman on the most important day of her life. I flipped the photograph over. The date was written in blue ink, in perfect handwriting, August 15, 1976, and underneath, barely visible, almost erased by time, there was something else, an initial M. Just that, a letter, a mystery. I took a deep breath, and finally I dared to open the envelope. My hands trembled so much I almost ripped the paper. Inside were several carefully folded sheets, Robert's handwriting, that slanted, firm hand that I knew so well. The letter was dated 1 week before his death. I began to read. Ellen, if you are reading this, it means I am no longer with you. It means my time ran out before I could tell you the truth in person. Forgive me. For 38 years, I was your husband, Jim's father, the man who promised to love and protect you until my last day. And I did, Ellen. I loved you with everything I had. But I was never completely honest with you. There is something I kept hidden from before I even met you. Something I couldn't tell you without destroying everything we built together. In 1976, I was engaged to a woman named Madeline. We were going to get married on August 15 of that year. Everything was ready. The church, the guests, her dress, our future. But 2 weeks before the wedding, Madeline disappeared. There was no goodbye. There was no explanation. Just a brief note she left at my house, telling me she couldn't marry me, that she had made a mistake, that I should forgive her. I never heard from her again. It crushed me, Ellen. I spent months trying to understand what I had done wrong, why she left me, if there was another man, if it was my fault. And then I met you, and everything changed. With you, I learned to believe in love, in family, in the future again. I thought Madeline had just been a mistake of the past, a closed chapter. But 6 months ago, I received a letter from her. She is sick, Ellen, very sick. and she sought me out because there is something she never told me, something that changes everything. The first page ended there. My hands were shaking so hard I almost dropped the paper. I felt like I couldn't get air into my lungs. Robert, he was engaged before me. That, in itself, wasn't terrible. Many men have relationships before getting married. But what hurt me wasn't that. It was that he never told me. 38 years together, thousands of conversations, whole nights talking about our lives, our dreams, our fears. And he never mentioned Madeline. Why? What was so awful about that story that he had to hide it from me for almost 4 decades? I kept reading. The second page. Ellen, I know this must hurt you. I know you're asking yourself why I never told you. And the truth is, I was afraid. Afraid you would think I never truly loved you. Afraid you would see Madeline as a shadow between us. Afraid of ruining the one good thing that ever happened to me. But now, after receiving her letter, I know I can't leave this world without you knowing the truth. Madeline wrote to me from a hospital in Chicago. She told me she has terminal cancer, that the doctors gave her less than a year to live, and that before she dies, she needed to tell me something she kept secret all these years. Ellen, when Madeline left me in 1976, she was pregnant, with my child, and she never told me. The letter fell from my hands. No. This couldn't be happening. I felt the floor moving beneath me, the stable walls closing in, the air becoming thick, unbreathable. Robert had a son, before Jim, and he never knew. Or if he did know. I picked up the letter with trembling hands and kept reading, even though every word was like a knife in my chest. Madeline told me she ran away because she was afraid. Her family was very conservative. Her father was a violent man. When he found out she was pregnant out of wedlock, he threatened to throw her out of the house, to disinherit her. So she made a decision. She left for Chicago, alone. She had the baby there, and gave him up for adoption. A boy, Ellen. I had a son, and I never knew about him. Madeline wrote to me because, before she dies, she wants to find him. She wants to know what became of him. And she asked for my help. I wanted to tell you. Every night, for these 6 months, I was on the verge of telling you, but I couldn't find the words. I didn't know how to explain that there was a part of my life I had hidden from you. So I made a decision. I hired a private investigator. I asked him to look for that boy, who must be a man of almost 48 years now. And he found him, Ellen. He found him. But when I was about to tell you everything, the doctors told me my heart was failing, that I didn't have much time left. And I knew I wouldn't have the chance to explain this to you face to face. That's why I left this letter. Because I need you to know the truth. And because I need you to make a decision for me. The name of that man is in the documents you will find in the chest. His address, his history, everything the investigator could gather. Ellen, I know this is a lot. I know you may hate me for hiding this from you. And I understand. But I ask you for everything we shared together, for everything we loved, that you look for him, that you tell him who his father was, that you give him what I could never give him, the truth. Yours always, Robert. I let the letter drop to the floor, and for the first time since I buried my husband, I cried. I cried like I hadn't cried at the funeral, like I hadn't cried when they closed the casket, like I hadn't cried when they lowered his body into the ground. I cried because the man I thought I knew for 38 years had just become a stranger. I cried because the life I thought we had built together was founded on a silence. And I cried because suddenly I realized something worse. If Robert had a son before Jim, that meant Jim had a brother he never knew, a brother who maybe didn't even know Robert existed. I wiped my tears with the sleeve of my blazer and took a deep breath. I looked at the open chest. Inside, besides the letter, there was a manila folder with a name written on the cover. Private Investigation, Case R. Stewart. I took it out. I opened it. And there, on the first page, was the photograph of a man about 47 years old, dark hair with some grey, deep-set eyes, a shy smile. He looked like Robert. My God. He looked so much like Robert it was impossible to deny it. Below the photo, his name, Henry Miller, place of residence, Chicago, Illinois. Occupation, middle school teacher, marital status, divorced, no children. I closed my eyes, and in that moment, I knew my life had just been split in two, the life before I opened the chest, and the life after. Because now I had to make an impossible decision. Should I tell Jim he had a brother? Should I look for that man, Henry, and tell him the truth? Or should I keep the secret, as Robert did for almost 50 years, and let everything remain buried with him? I left the stable when it was getting dark. The sky had turned violet. The hills around Texas looked black against the horizon. Mr. Frank was already gone. The ranch was silent. I walked to my car, put the folder and the letter in my purse, and drove back to New York City. The whole drive, I couldn't stop thinking about one thing. Robert asked me to give that man the truth, but at what cost? Because telling Henry that his father died without knowing him was cruel. Telling Jim he had a secret brother could destroy the image he had of his father. And telling myself, out loud, meant accepting that the man I loved never fully trusted me. When I got home, it was already midnight. The living room was dark. Jim had come to stay with me during the funeral, but he had already returned to Denver, where he lived with his wife and their 2 daughters. I sat down on the sofa, with the folder in my hands, and there, in the silence of my empty house, I made a decision. I was going to look for Henry, not because Robert asked me to, but because that man had a right to know where he came from, who his father was, why his mother gave him up for adoption, even if it meant opening a wound that had been closed for almost 50 years. For the next 3 days, I did nothing, absolutely nothing. The folder remained on the dining room table, closed, Robert's letter folded inside my purse, Henry's photograph tucked away in the drawer of my dresser under the stockings I no longer wore. I couldn't look at it. I couldn't read it again, because every time I did, I felt something inside me break a little more. I got up every morning trying to go on with my life. I made coffee, watered the patio plants, tied up the wisteria that had come loose in the wind, made the beds, washed the dishes. All those small things one does to pretend everything is fine. But inside, I was destroyed, because every corner of that house reminded me of Robert. The armchair where he sat to read the paper on Sundays, the blue ceramic mug he used for his coffee, the closet where his plaid shirts still hung, smelling of his lavender cologne. And now, every one of those memories, it came with a question. When was he planning to tell me the truth? Was he ever close to telling me? Or did he always plan to take the secret to the grave? On the 4th day, Jim called me. "Mom, how are you?" His voice sounded worried, loving, as always. "Fine, honey," I lied. "Just taking it slow, you know. Have you been eating well? Do you need me to come? I can ask for a few days off work and—" "No, Jim. I'm fine, really. Don't worry about me." There was a silence. "Mum, I know this is hard. Losing Dad is something I never imagined would happen so soon. But you're alone, and that worries me." A lump formed in my throat. I'm not alone, son. I have you and your girls and Sarah. Sarah was his wife, a good woman, hard-working, who always treated me with kindness. I know, Mum, but still, if you need to talk, if you need anything at all, call me any time. I will, honey, I promise. I hung up the phone and stared at the screen for several minutes. Jim, my son, the man Robert and I raised together, the one who was born in this house, the one who learned to walk in the backyard, the one who cried the day we dropped him off at college. How was I going to tell him his father had another son? How was I going to explain that, before he was born, there was someone else? I couldn't. I simply couldn't. So I decided to keep quiet, at least for now. That night, I opened the folder again. I couldn't help it. Henry's photograph stared at me from the first page. Those dark eyes, that shy smile that so resembled Robert's. I read his complete information. Henry Miller, date of birth, May the 3rd, 1977. Place of birth, Chicago, Illinois. Adopted at 3 days old by the Miller family. Adoptive father, Paul Miller, deceased in 2005. Adoptive mother, Mary Miller, deceased in 2019. Education, Bachelor of Arts in History from the University of Illinois. Current occupation, middle school teacher at Federal Middle School, number 12, Chicago. Marital status, divorced since 2018. No children. Current address, Liberty Street, 456, American Neighborhood, Chicago, Illinois. There were a few more photographs, images the investigator must have taken without Henry knowing. In one, he was leaving school with a backpack over his shoulder and a thermos in his hand. He looked tired but smiling. In another, he was sitting in a cafe, reading a book. He wore reading glasses, just like Robert. And in yet another, he was standing in front of a bookstore, looking at the display windows with his hands in his pockets. He was a quiet man, lonely perhaps, but there was something in his face that made me feel a deep sadness. He looked incomplete, as if something were missing, as if his whole life he had been searching for something he never found. I closed the folder and took a deep breath. And then, without thinking too much, I picked up my cell phone and dialed the number that was in the report. Henry's number. It rang once, twice, 3 times. I was about to hang up when I heard his voice. Hello? I froze. His voice was deep, calm, kind, like Robert's. Hello? He repeated. Is anyone there? I hung up. I couldn't do it. I couldn't just call him and say, Hi, I'm the widow of your father, a father you never knew. Can we talk? How do you say something like that to a stranger? I didn't sleep that night. I stayed awake, sitting in bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about everything that had happened, everything that was yet to happen. And at some point in the early hours of the morning, I made another decision. If I was going to do this, if I was going to look for Henry and tell him the truth, I couldn't do it alone. I needed help. But not from Jim. Not yet. I needed someone who could understand the situation without judging me. Someone who knew Robert. Someone I could trust. And there was only one person who fit that description. My sister-in-law, Sophia, Robert's younger sister. Sophia lived in New Jersey. She was 5 years younger than Robert. An independent woman, direct, who didn't mince words. When Robert and I got married, she was the only one in his family who welcomed me with open arms. The rest, well, let's just say they weren't thrilled that Robert was marrying a woman with no background like me. But Sophia was always different. If my brother chose you, she told me on our wedding day, it's because he saw something in you that no one else has. And I trust him. We became friends, close, confidants. But after Robert died, Sophia couldn't come to the funeral. She was out of the country, visiting her daughter in London. She called me, devastated, begging for forgiveness for not being there. "I promise you, as soon as I get back, I'll see you," she said. "I won't leave you alone, Ellen." And she kept her word. 3 days after I opened the chest, Sophia knocked on my door. I saw her through the peephole and felt enormous relief. I opened the door, and before I could say anything, she hugged me. "Ellen, my Ellen," I cried in her arms like I hadn't cried since I read Robert's letter. We stood there, in the doorway, embracing, crying together. When we finally separated, Sophia looked me in the eyes. "You're too thin," she said worriedly. "Have you been eating properly?" "More or less." "That means no. Come on, let's make some coffee, and you're going to tell me everything." We went into the kitchen. Sophia put water on to boil and got the coffee out of the cupboard as if it were her own house. She had always been like that, practical, efficient, no beating around the bush. We sat down at the dining room table, and I didn't know where to start. "Sophia," I said slowly, "there's something I need to tell you, something I found out a few days ago." She looked at me with that direct gaze she had, that look that didn't allow for lies. "Something about Robert?" I nodded. "Something bad?" I nodded again. Sophia sighed and took my hand. "Tell me." I told her everything, from Mr. Frank's call to the open chest, from Madeline's photograph to Robert's letter, from the secret pregnancy to Henry's existence. Everything. Sophia didn't say a single word while I spoke. She just listened, her eyes fixed on me, never letting go of my hand. When I finished, she was silent for several minutes. Then finally she spoke. "That idiot." I looked at her, surprised. "What?" "That idiot brother of mine," she repeated, her voice trembling with rage. "How could he do this to you? How could he keep something like that secret for so long?" Sophia, "No, Ellen, don't defend him. I loved my brother. I loved him with all my heart. But this is unforgivable." She got up from the table and started pacing the kitchen, her hands on her head. "Robert was always like that," she said, more to herself than to me. "Always keeping things to himself, always believing he could solve everything alone, always thinking he was protecting others with his silence." She turned to face me. "But he didn't protect you, Ellen. He left you with this. He left you with a bomb in your hands, and now you're the one who has to decide what to do." She was right. And the worst part is, I already knew it. As I tell this story, I wonder where you are listening. Maybe at your house, maybe at work, maybe in your car, on the way somewhere. Write the name of your city in the comments. I want to know where you are joining me on this journey, because sometimes knowing we're not alone makes everything a little easier. Sophia sat down opposite me again. "Ellen," she said, "so what are you going to do?" "I don't know," I admitted. "Part of me wants to look for Henry, tell him the truth, give him what Robert took away, knowing who his father was. And the other part—" I lowered my gaze. "The other part is afraid. Afraid Jim will hate me for hiding this. Afraid Henry won't want anything to do with us. Afraid of all of this destroying what little I have left of Robert." Sophia sighed. "Ellen, listen to me closely. Robert made a mistake. A huge mistake. But you don't have to carry that burden. You don't have to fix what he left broken." "But he asked me to." "He had no right to ask you." Those words hit me, because she was right. Robert had no right to leave me with this responsibility. He had no right to ask me to look for that man, to tell him the truth, to fix his past. But what if I didn't? What if I let Henry continue living without knowing? Would that make me any better than Robert? I don't know what to do, Sophia, I whispered, tears in my eyes. I truly don't know. She hugged me. It's okay not to know, Ellen. It's okay to feel lost. But there is one thing I do know. What? Whatever you decide, I'll be with you. You won't go through this alone. And in that moment, I realized something. Maybe Robert left me with this burden, but I didn't have to carry it alone. I had Sophia. I had Jim. I had my own strength. And even though I didn't know what I was going to do, I knew that eventually I would make a decision, and I would live with the consequences, as I always had. Sophia stayed with me that night. She made vegetable soup. She forced me to eat even though I wasn't hungry. And afterward, we sat in the living room watching an old black and white movie that neither of us was really watching. We just needed company. Shared silence. Someone who understood that sometimes words are unnecessary. Before going to sleep, Sophia took my hands. Ellen, promise me something. What? That you won't make any major decisions this week. Give your heart time. Breathe. Think. And when you're ready, I'll be here. I nodded. I promise. But that night, when Sophia was asleep in the guest room, I was still awake, staring at the ceiling, thinking. Because even though I had promised her I wouldn't make rushed decisions, there was something I couldn't stop doing. I needed to know more. More about Madeline. More about what happened in 1976. More about that son she gave up for adoption, who was now a middle school teacher in Chicago. I needed to understand. The next morning, while Sophia was making coffee, I told her I needed to go somewhere. Where? She asked, without looking at me. To Chicago. Sophia dropped the mug she was washing and turned around slowly. Ellen, you just promised me you wouldn't do anything rushed. And I'm not, I replied calmly. I'm not going to look for Henry. Not yet. I need to see. I need to know what he's like, where he lives, what his life is like. That's called spying. It's called protecting myself, I corrected. Because if I'm going to make the decision to approach him, I need to know who I'm dealing with. I can't just show up in his life knowing nothing. Sophia looked at me for a long time. Then she sighed. All right, but you're not going alone. No, Ellen, you're not going alone. If you're going to do this, I'm coming with you. And I won't take no for an answer. I looked at her, and I saw in her eyes the same determination Robert had when he made a decision. All right, I conceded. Let's go together. 3 days later, Sophia and I were on a train heading to Chicago. We decided not to fly. We didn't want to leave a trail. We didn't want anyone to know where we were going or why. The trip lasted almost 7 hours. 7 hours of tracks, of slowly changing landscapes, of small towns passing by the window like blurry memories. Sophia tried to distract me with conversation. She told me about her daughter in London, her grandchildren, her plans to remodel her house in New Jersey. But I barely listened. Because every mile that brought us closer to Chicago also brought me closer to a truth I didn't know if I wanted to face. We arrived at noon. We checked into a small hotel downtown. Nothing fancy, just a discreet place to spend the night. After leaving our suitcases, Sophia took out the folder I had brought. All right, she said, reading the address. Liberty Street, 456, American Neighborhood. What do you want to do? Go straight there? No, I replied. First, I want to see the school where he works. I want to… See him from a distance. Sophia nodded. All right, let's go. We took a taxi to Federal Middle School number 12. It was a large two-story building, painted yellow and white. There were kids leaving the classrooms, running down the hallways, laughing, shouting. The normal hustle of a school. We stood on the opposite side of the street, in the shadow of a maple tree. What time did you say he gets out? Sophia asked. The report says he usually leaves at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. It was 1:40. We wait. 20 minutes later, the main door opened, and the teachers began to leave. My heart was pounding so hard I felt it would jump out of my chest. And then I saw him. Henry walked out slowly, with a backpack over his shoulder and a thermos in his hand. He was wearing a light blue plaid shirt, jeans, and comfortable shoes. He wore glasses, his hair a little messy from the wind. He looked tired, but also calm. He stopped on the sidewalk, took his cell phone out of his pocket, and checked something. Then he put the phone away, adjusted his backpack, and started walking. It's him, I whispered, almost voiceless. Sophia took my arm. Are you all right? I didn't answer because I wasn't all right. Because seeing that man was like seeing a ghost of Robert. He walked like him, had the same posture, the same way of tilting his head when he thought. My God, he was his son. There was no doubt. We followed him from a distance. I don't know if it was right. I don't know if it was ethical, but I needed to know more. Henry walked about 4 blocks until he reached a small corner cafe. He went in, sat by the window, ordered something, took a book out of his backpack, and started reading. Sophia and I stayed outside, across the street, watching him. What are we doing, Ellen? Sophia asked me quietly. What are we hoping to find? I don't know, I admitted. I need to see him. I need to know what his life is like before I break it, because that was what was going to happen, wasn't it? If I approached him and told him the truth, his life would change forever, just as mine changed when I opened that chest. We stayed there for almost an hour, watching Henry read, how he drank his coffee, how he occasionally looked out the window with that absent expression of someone thinking about something else. At some point, a young woman approached his table, smiled at him, said something. He looked up, smiled too, but shook his head. The woman left, and Henry went back to his book. He's lonely, Sophia murmured. You can tell. She was right. There was something about Henry that radiated solitude, not sadness, not bitterness, just loneliness. As if his whole life he had been accustomed to being alone, as if he had never found his place in the world. When Henry left the cafe, we followed him again. He walked to an antique bookstore. He went inside. He spent almost half an hour there, examining books, flipping through them carefully, as if each one were a treasure. He bought 2 thin poetry books. Then he walked to a bakery and bought a bagel and a coffee to go. Finally, he arrived at his house, a 3-story apartment building painted beige, not elegant, but clean, well kept. Henry went up the stairs to the 2nd floor and entered one of the apartments. We stood across the street, looking at his apartment window. The curtains were open. We could see him moving inside, setting down his backpack, putting water on to boil, sitting on a small sofa with one of the books he had just bought. Ellen, Sophia said softly, we've seen enough. Let's go. But I couldn't move, because I was looking at the life of a man I didn't know, a man who was Robert's son, a man who could have been part of my family. And I wondered, what would everything have been like if Robert had known from the beginning? If Madeline had told him the truth? If Henry had grown up with us? Would Jim and he have been close brothers? Would Henry have had a different, happier life? That night, back at the hotel, I couldn't sleep. I stayed awake, sitting in bed, looking at the city lights through the window. Sophia was asleep in the bed next to me, breathing deeply, and I could only think of Henry, his solitary life, his simple routine, that absent expression he had when he looked out the cafe window. Did he know he was adopted? The investigator's report didn't say. Did he ever wonder about his biological parents? Did he ever feel like something was missing? The next morning, we made another decision. Before returning to New York City, Sophia suggested something. "Ellen, what if we look for Madeline?" I looked at her, surprised. "Madeline?" "Yes. Robert said she was sick, that she was in a hospital here in Chicago. Maybe she can give us more answers." I thought about it, and while a part of me didn't want to face her, another part knew Sophia was right. I needed to hear Madeline's side of the story. I needed to know why she ran away, why she never told Robert the truth, why she gave her son up for adoption, because only then could I fully understand what had happened. I called the private investigator Robert had hired. I explained who I was and asked for information about Madeline. "Mrs. Stewart," he said with a serious voice, "I understand this is difficult for you, but I must warn you about something. Mrs. Madeline is very ill. When Mr. Robert hired me, she was undergoing treatment. But according to my last report, she entered hospice care 2 weeks ago." My heart sank. What does that mean? It means the doctors can't do any more for her. She has weeks, maybe days. I closed my eyes. Madeline was dying, and if I didn't look for her now, I would never have the chance to speak with her. "What hospital is she in?" I asked. "Chicago General Hospital, Oncology Ward, room 312. I wrote down the information. "Thank you." "Mrs. Stewart, one last thing." "Yes?" She knows Mr. Robert passed away. I informed her a week ago when you contacted me. I don't know how she reacted because I couldn't see her personally, but the hospital staff told me she hasn't had any visitors since then." I swallowed. "I understand. Thank you." I hung up. Sophia looked at me. "What did he tell you?" "That Madeline is in hospice care, that she has days left, and that she already knows Robert died." Sophia exhaled deeply. "Do you want to go see her?" I nodded. "Yes, but I'm scared." "Of what?" "Of what I'll feel when I see her." Sophia came closer and hugged me. "Ellen, listen to me. You are the strongest woman I know, and whatever you feel when you see her, it's okay. You don't have to pretend. You don't have to be brave. Just be yourself." I took a deep breath. "All right, let's go." An hour later, we were standing in front of the Chicago General Hospital, a huge white building with windows reflecting the afternoon sun. We went inside. We went up to the third floor. We walked through the corridors of the oncology ward where the smell of disinfectant mixed with something heavier, something I couldn't describe, but that I recognized immediately. The smell of imminent death. We arrived at room 312. The door was slightly ajar. I froze. Sophia took my hand. "Are you ready?" I wasn't, but I nodded anyway, and I pushed the door open. The room was small, simple. A bed, a chair, a window with white curtains letting in the afternoon light. And in the bed, there she was, Madeline. The woman from the photograph no longer existed. In her place was someone unrecognizable, thin, pale, with completely white and sparse hair, sunken eyes, hands like dry branches on the sheets. But when she saw me come in, her eyes opened, and in them I saw something I didn't expect. Recognition. "You," she whispered in a weak, almost inaudible voice. "You are Ellen." I froze. "How did you know?" "Robert showed me. A photograph of you," she said with effort. "Months ago, when he came to see me." The world stopped. "Robert came to see you?" She nodded slowly. "Yes, before he died. He looked for me. He asked me about our son." I felt my legs shaking. "And?" Madeline closed her eyes, and I told him everything. I slowly sat down in the chair next to the bed. My legs couldn't support me anymore. Sophia stood silently behind me, a hand on my shoulder, present. Madeline opened her eyes again. She looked at me with that vacant gaze of someone who has already made peace with death. "I didn't think you would come," she said, her voice strained. "I thought you would hate me." "I don't know you well enough to hate you," I replied, surprised at how calm my voice sounded. "But I need to know the truth, the whole truth." She nodded slowly. "I know, and I'm going to give it to you because I don't have time left to keep secrets." She inhaled with difficulty. Each breath seemed to cost her an enormous effort. "Do you want some water?" I asked her. "No, just listen to me, before it's too late." Madeline began to speak, and I could only listen. "I met Robert in 1975, she said. "I was 22 years old. He was 25. A mutual friend introduced us at a party in Nashville. Robert had just finished college. I was finishing mine, teaching certification." She paused. "We fell in love fast. Too fast, maybe, but it was something beautiful, something real. Robert was different from all the men I had known. He was kind, respectful, a dreamer." I listened without interrupting. "6 months later, he asked me to marry him. I said yes without thinking. I was so happy, so excited. I thought I had finally found my place in the world." Her voice broke. "But then I realized I was pregnant." She closed her eyes. "It was June of 1976, 2 months before the wedding. I took a test in secret, and when it came back positive, I was terrified." "Why?" I asked gently. "You were getting married anyway." "Because my father," she said with bitterness in her voice. "My father was a terrible man, violent, controlling, and very, very religious." She opened her eyes and looked at me. For him, getting pregnant before marriage was the worst sin a woman could commit. It didn't matter that I was already engaged. It didn't matter that the wedding was in 2 months. For him, it was a dishonor. She swallowed. And I knew him. I knew how he would react. I knew he would throw me out of the house, that he would disinherit me, that he would tell everyone I was a tramp. A tear escaped. But the worst part, is that I also knew what he would do to Robert. "My father hated Robert," Madeline continued. "He said he was a man without ambition, that the Texas ranch was a ruin, that I deserved better. He only accepted the engagement because my mother convinced him, but he was always looking for a reason to break it." "And the pregnancy was that reason," I completed. "Exactly. If my father found out, he wouldn't just throw me out. He would also destroy Robert. He would use his contacts to ruin him." to make sure he could never get back on his feet. She took a long pause. So, I made a decision, a terrible decision. I wrote Robert a letter, she said, her voice trembling. I told him I couldn't marry him, that I had made a mistake, that I didn't love him enough. But that was a lie, I whispered. Yes, it was a lie. I loved him with all my being, but I thought it was the only way to protect him, to protect myself, to protect the baby. And what did you do? I left. That same night, I took a bus to Chicago. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. I just disappeared. She wiped the tears with the back of her hand. I stayed at a distant cousin's house. I told her I had broken up with my fiancé and needed a place to stay. She didn't ask questions. She let me stay. And I spent those months in hiding, waiting. Henry was born on May 3rd, 1977, she continued, in a public hospital. I was alone during the entire delivery. No one was with me. Not my mother, not my friends, not Robert. Her voice broke completely. When I saw him for the first time, when I held him in my arms, I knew I had made the biggest mistake of my life. She cried, a silent, deep cry. Because that baby looked so much like Robert. He had his eyes, his nose, his hands. And I knew I couldn't keep him. Why not? Sophia asked from behind, her voice trembling. Because I had no way to support him, Madeline replied. I had no money. I had no job. I had no family to support me. And I knew that if I went back home with a baby, my father would make my life impossible. And the child's, too. She closed her eyes. So 3 days after he was born, I gave him up for adoption. The silence in that room was deafening. Madeline was still crying. I didn't know what to feel. Anger, compassion, sadness, everything at once. And then I asked slowly, what happened next? Afterward, I tried to rebuild my life. I got a job as a teacher at an elementary school. I got married. I got divorced. I got married again. I had another son, but I lost him during the pregnancy. She paused. And every day for 47 years, I thought about Henry, where he might be, if he was okay, if he hated me for abandoning him. Did you never try to look for him? Sophia asked. No, Madeline admitted, because I was afraid he would reject me, afraid of opening that wound, afraid of facing what I had done. She turned to me. Until I was diagnosed with cancer, 2 years ago, and I knew my time was running out. That's when I looked for Robert, she said. I didn't know if he was still alive. I didn't know if he had married. I didn't know anything. But I needed to find him. I needed to tell him the truth before I died. And how did you find him? Through the internet. I searched for his name. And there he was, Robert Stewart, owner of the ranch in Texas, married to Ellen Stewart, one son, Jim. She looked at me with something close to guilt. When I saw your photograph, when I saw that Robert had built a beautiful life, I felt relieved. But I also felt destroyed, because I realized he had been happy without me, and that I had wasted my life keeping a secret that no longer mattered. I wrote him a letter, she continued. I told him everything, the pregnancy, Henry, the adoption, and I asked for his forgiveness. I didn't expect him to answer. But he did. My heart was pounding so hard I felt it would explode. What did he tell you? That he wanted to see me. That he needed to know more. That he wanted to find our son. She wiped her tears. He came here, to Chicago, 7 months ago. It was the first time I had seen him in more than 40 years. And how was that meeting? Madeline smiled sadly. It was painful, but also healing. Robert was angry. He had every right to be. He told me I had taken something away from him that he could never get back. The right to know his son, to be his father. She paused. But he also forgave me. Tears ran down my face. I couldn't stop them. He told me, Madeline, what happened happened. We can't change it. But we can do something now. We can look for Henry. We can give him the truth. And then Robert hired an investigator, she said. It took 4 months to find him. And when he did, Robert came to see me again. He showed me the photographs. He told me everything about him. And what did you feel? I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know the answer. I felt relief, because Henry was fine. He had a life, a job. He wasn't rich, but he wasn't alone either. And he looked so much like Robert that there was no doubt he was our son. She closed her eyes. Robert told me he was going to approach him, that he was going to tell him the truth. But first he wanted to prepare everything. He wanted to make sure Henry was ready to listen. And then Robert died, I completed. Yes, the investigator told me a week ago, and I knew it was my punishment, that God was making me pay for all the harm I had caused, because now Henry will never know who his father was. I leaned forward. Madeline, I said in a firm voice, does Henry know he's adopted? She nodded. Yes, his adoptive parents told him when he was 15 years old. But he never tried to look for his biological parents. At least that's what the investigator found out. Why not? Madeline sighed. Because his adoptive parents were good to him. They loved him. They cared for him. And he was loyal to them. He never wanted to hurt them by looking for someone else. I closed my eyes. Henry hadn't looked for the truth because he didn't want to hurt the people who raised him. Just like I didn't want to hurt Jim by telling him about this secret brother. We were the same, prisoners of our own sense of loyalty. Ellen, Madeline said, her voice weak, I know I have no right to ask you for anything. I know I hurt you, that I hurt Robert, that I hurt Henry, everyone. She paused. But I'm going to ask you for something anyway. What? Look for him. Tell him the truth. Tell him Robert wanted to know him. That I'm sorry. That I never stopped thinking about him. She looked at me with those sunken eyes, full of pleading. Give him what I never gave him. A family, a history, a place where he comes from. I couldn't answer, because I didn't know if I could promise her that. I didn't know if I had the strength. But before I could say anything, Madeline spoke again. Ellen, there's something else you need to know. My heart stopped. What? She took a deep, difficult breath. Robert left something for Henry, something that is in the chest. I already know. The documents, the photographs, the letter. No, Madeline said, shaking her head. There's something else. Something Robert didn't put in the letter he left you. What is it? Madeline closed her eyes. An inheritance. Robert changed his will 2 weeks before he died. He left a portion of the ranch in Henry's name. The world stopped. What? Robert wanted Henry to have something, even though he never met him, even though he never got to be his father. He wanted to leave him something that would tell him, "You were important. You were always important." I stumbled out of that room. Sophia held my arm as we went down the hospital stairs. I couldn't think. I couldn't process it. Robert had changed his will. He had left part of the ranch to a son he never knew. And that meant that when the will was read, Jim would find out. Everything. I still wonder if Robert did the right thing, if he should have told me the truth before he died, if he should have left me this responsibility. And you? What would you have done in my place? Would you have told Henry the truth? Or would you have let everything stay buried? Let me know in the comments, because sometimes we need to hear what others would do to find our own way. That night, back at the hotel, Sophia and I didn't talk. We just sat on the bed, side by side, staring at the wall, processing, trying to understand. And finally, Sophia spoke. "Ellen, you have to tell Jim before the will is read." "I know. It's going to be difficult. I know. But it's the right thing to do." I closed my eyes. "I know. Because deep down, I always knew. I always knew I couldn't keep this secret, that eventually I would have to face it, and that when I did, everything would change. Forever." The trip back to New York City was the longest of my life. Sophia tried to sleep, but I knew she couldn't either. I heard her shifting in the seat next to me, sighing occasionally, looking for a comfortable position that never came. I just stared out the bus window, at the dark landscape, the lights of the small towns we passed, the stars shining in the moonless sky. And I thought about how I was going to tell Jim his father had another son. I thought about the exact words I would use. I thought about his face when he heard it. I thought about whether he would ever forgive me for hiding this from him, even if it was only for a few days. We arrived in New York City at 6 o'clock in the morning. The sky was just beginning to lighten. The streets were empty. The cold January air hit me when we got off the bus. Sophia hugged me before taking a taxi to New Jersey. "Call me after you talk to Jim," she said. "No matter what time it is, just call me." "I will." "Ellen, you are stronger than you think. Don't forget that." I nodded, even though I didn't feel strong. I felt broken. I got home when the sun was already rising. I left my suitcase at the entrance. I poured myself a glass of water. I sat down at the dining room table, and I took out my phone. I dialed Jim's number. It rang 3 times before he answered. "Mom?" His voice sounded sleepy. "Are you all right? It's 6:30 in the morning." "Jim?" My voice broke. "I need you to come home. Today. As soon as possible." "What happened? Are you sick?" "No, I'm not sick. But I need to talk to you. It's important." There was a silence. "Is it something about Dad?" I closed my eyes. "Yes." "I'm on my way. Give me 3 hours. I'll catch the first flight I can get." "Thank you, honey." "Mum, you're scaring me." "I know. Forgive me. But I'll see you in a bit, okay?" "Yes, I'll be there." He hung up. Those 3 hours were eternal. I took a shower. I put on clean clothes. I made coffee. I took out the muffins I had stored in the cupboard. Everything mechanically, like a robot, because if I thought too much about what I was going to do, I wouldn't be able to do it. Jim arrived at 10 o'clock in the morning. He came through the door with his carry-on bag, his hair messy, his shirt wrinkled. He looked tired, worried. "Mum," he said, hugging me tightly. "What's going on?" "Sit down, son. Please." We sat down in the living room, on the same sofa where we had sat so many times as a family, Robert, Jim, and me. Jim looked at me with those big eyes, full of concern, and I didn't know where to start. "Jim," I finally said, my voice trembling, "what I'm about to tell you is going to change everything you thought you knew about your father." He tensed up. "What did he do?" "He didn't do anything wrong," I clarified quickly. "At least, not intentionally, but he kept a secret. A very big secret. And now I have to tell you." "Mum, you're scaring me. Just tell me what it is." I took a deep breath. "Your father, before he met me, was engaged to another woman." Jim blinked. "So? Lots of people have relationships before they get married. I don't understand why—" "That woman," I continued, "got pregnant with your father's child." The silence that followed was like thunder. Jim froze. His face went from confusion to shock in a matter of seconds. "What?" "Your father had a son he never knew, because the mother ran away without telling him anything, and she gave the baby up for adoption." Jim stood up from the sofa. "No, no, no, no. This can't be true. Mum, are you telling me I have a brother?" "Yes." "And Dad knew?" "He found out 6 months ago when that child's mother, who is now a 47-year-old man, wrote him a letter telling him the truth." Jim started pacing, his hands on his head. "No, no, this can't be happening." I told him everything, from Mr. Frank's call to the open chest, from Robert's letter to my trip to Chicago, from my meeting with Madeline to the final revelation, the will. When I got to that part, Jim stopped dead in his tracks. "Dad left him part of the ranch?" "Yes." "To a man he never met?" "Yes." "And when were you going to tell me this?" "I'm telling you now. After you already knew. How long have you been keeping this, Mum?" "Days. Weeks. Days. Only days." "Jim, I just found out too." "But you knew and you didn't tell me." His voice broke. "Why, Mum? Why didn't you tell me right away?" I got up and walked toward him. "Because I was afraid, Jim. Afraid of how you were going to react. Afraid you would hate your father. Afraid of losing you." "Losing me?" Jim looked at me with tears in his eyes. "Mum, I would never leave you. But, but I feel like everything I believed in was a lie." "It wasn't a lie." "Yes, it was. Dad lied to us. To you, to me, to everyone. For 38 years he lived with a secret he never told us. And now it turns out I have a brother who doesn't even know I exist." He collapsed onto the sofa, his head in his hands. "What's his name?" "Henry. Henry Miller." "And where is he?" "In Chicago. He's a middle school teacher." Jim looked up. "Did you meet him?" "No, I just saw him. From a distance." "And what's he like?" I hesitated. "He looks a lot like your father." Jim closed his eyes, and he wept. I had never seen him cry like that. Not when he fell off his bike and broke his arm at 8 years old. Not when his high school girlfriend left him. Not even at Robert's funeral. But now he cried like a child. I sat next to him and hugged him. "I'm sorry, honey. I'm so sorry." "It's not your fault, Mom," he said between sobs. But it hurts. It hurts to know that Dad kept this. that he never trusted us enough to tell us. He wanted to protect us. No, he wanted to protect himself, because if he had told us, he would have had to face his past, and he preferred to hide it. We were silent for a long time. Jim dried his tears. He stood up, walked to the window, and looked outside. "When is the will being read?" he finally asked. "In 1 week. Mr. Montell called me yesterday. He said it's urgent because Henry is in the will." "Yes," Jim sighed. "Do you want me to meet Henry?" The question caught me by surprise. "I don't know, son. That's something you have to decide." "But Dad wanted us to meet him, right? That's why he left all of this. That's why he changed the will." "Yes, I think so." Jim turned to me. "Then we have to do it. We have to look for Henry and tell him the truth." "Jim, are you sure?" "No," he admitted. "I'm not sure of anything, but if I don't do it, I'll live the rest of my life wondering what it would have been like. And I've had enough of secrets, Mum. I don't want to carry another one." I felt my chest swell with pride. My son, my beautiful son, braver than me, wiser than his father. "All right," I told him. "Then we'll do it together." That night, Jim stayed overnight at the house. We ate chicken noodle soup in silence. Neither of us had much appetite. Afterward, we sat in the living room watching television without really seeing it. At some point, Jim spoke. "Mum, do you think Dad loved us?" The question broke my heart. "Yes, honey, with all his heart." "Then why did he hide this from us?" "Because human beings are complicated. Because sometimes we do things that don't make sense. Because we love and we hurt at the same time. And because your father wasn't perfect. But he was ours." Jim nodded slowly. "I miss him." "Me too." 2 days later, Jim and I were on a plane heading to Chicago. We had decided to go together, because this was something we had to do as a family, even if Henry didn't know it yet. We arrived in Chicago at noon. We rented a car and drove to Federal Middle School number 12. It was Friday, a school day. We parked across the street from the school, and we waited. At 2 o'clock in the afternoon, just as the report said, Henry walked out of the building. Jim saw him for the first time, and he froze. "My God," he whispered. He's like looking at Dad." "I know." "Is that my brother?" "Yes." Jim watched Henry walk down the sidewalk, with his backpack over his shoulder and his thermos in his hand. And then, without saying anything, he opened the car door. "Jim, what are you doing?" "I'm going to talk to him." "Now?" "Yes, now. Because if I don't do it now, I'll lose my nerve." I got out of the car behind him. We walked quickly, crossing the street. Henry was about 20 yards away. "Excuse me," Jim shouted. Henry stopped. He turned around. He looked at us with curiosity. We approached, and when we were in front of him, Jim took a deep breath. "Henry Miller?" Henry blinked. "Yes, do I know you?" Jim looked at me. I nodded, and he looked back at Henry. "My name is Jim Stewart, and I believe you're my brother." Henry's face changed, from curiosity to confusion, from confusion to disbelief. "What?" "Your biological father," I continued, my voice trembling, "was named Robert Stewart, and I was his wife. And this is his son, your brother." Henry looked at us as if we had lost our minds. I don't understand. What are you talking about?" "I know this is hard to believe," I said. I know it sounds impossible, but can we talk? Somewhere more private? We have a lot to tell you. Henry was silent for several seconds. Then finally he nodded. All right. Let's go to the coffee shop on the corner. We sat at a table in the back. We ordered coffee, and we told him everything, from the beginning. Henry didn't say a single word while we spoke. He just listened, his eyes fixed on us, his hands trembling around his coffee cup. When we finished, he was silent for what seemed like an eternity. Then finally he spoke. I always knew I was adopted. My parents told me when I was 15 years old, but I never wanted to look for my biological parents because I felt that it would be a betrayal to the people who raised me. He paused. But now you're here, telling me that my biological father died without knowing me, and that I have a brother, and that there's an inheritance. He looked at us. How am I supposed to feel? Jim spoke before I did. I don't know how you're supposed to feel, he said softly. But if it helps, I feel the same way. Confused, angry, sad, everything at once. Henry looked at him. You didn't know about me either. No, I found out 3 days ago, and I was angry too. At my father, at my mom, at the world. And now, Jim smiled sadly. Now I just want to know you, because you are my brother. And even though we didn't grow up together, even though we didn't share the same life, we share the same blood. And that has to mean something. Henry started to cry, silently, his hands covering his face. I'm sorry, he said between sobs. It's just, my whole life I felt incomplete, like something was missing, and I never knew what it was. He wiped his tears. And now I know what it was. A family, a history, a place where I come from. Jim reached his hand across the table. Henry took it. And in that moment, I knew everything was going to be all right. Maybe not now, maybe not soon, but eventually, we spent the rest of that afternoon at the coffee shop, talking. Henry told us about his life. His adoptive parents, Paul and Mary, had been humble, hard-working people. Paul was a carpenter, Mary a seamstress. They didn't have much money, but they gave him all the love in the world. They put me through college, Henry said, with a sad smile. They worked double shifts for years so I could study. My dad, Paul, he died when I was 28 years old. A heart attack. He was working construction. And my mum, Mary, she passed away 5 years ago. Cancer. He wiped his tears. I never got to thank them enough. I never got to pay them back for everything they did for me. Jim listened in silence. I did too. That's why I never looked for my biological parents, Henry continued. Because I felt that it would be betraying them, like saying they weren't enough. And they were. They were more than enough. But you were still missing something, I said softly. Henry nodded. Yes, I was always missing something. I didn't know what, but it was like a hole, like a question without an answer. Jim talked to him about Robert. He told him what he was like, how he worked from sunup, how much he loved the ranch, how he taught him to ride a horse when he was 6 years old, how he sat him on his shoulders so he could reach the highest branches of the apple tree. He was a good man, Jim said. Not perfect, but good. And I know that if he had known about you from the beginning, he would have looked for you. He would have raised you. He would have given you everything you deserved. Henry listened with shining eyes. They just looked at each other. Two men who didn't know each other, but who shared the same blood, the same eyes, the same shy smile. As evening fell, Henry invited us to his apartment. It was small, a single room with an integrated kitchen, a bathroom, and a small balcony overlooking the street. But it was clean, tidy, full of books. "Forgive the mess," he said as he invited us in. "I don't usually have visitors." "It's perfect," I told him. We sat down on the small sofa. Henry made coffee, took out some cookies he had saved, and we kept talking for hours, as if all the lost time could be recovered in a single conversation. At some point, Henry asked, "And the inheritance? What exactly did Robert leave me?" Jim and I looked at each other. "We don't know exactly," I admitted. "The will is being read in 5 days, but according to what Madeline told me, Robert left you a portion of the ranch." "Of the ranch?" "Yes." Henry was silent. I don't want anything," he finally said. "I didn't come here looking for money or land. I came because you gave me something that money could never buy. A history, a family." Jim smiled. "I know, but that doesn't change the fact that Dad wanted to leave you something, and I think we should respect his wishes." Henry lowered his gaze. "I don't know if I can accept it. It doesn't seem fair. You grew up with him. You worked on the ranch. You earned that right. I'm just a stranger." "No," Jim said firmly. "You're not a stranger. You're my brother." That night, Jim and I stayed at a hotel near Henry's apartment. Before sleeping, my son spoke to me. "Mum?" "Yes?" "Did I do the right thing?" "What do you mean?" "Coming here, looking for Henry, telling him the truth." I moved closer to him and took his hand. "Yes, honey, you did the right thing. Because the truth is always better than a lie, even if it hurts." Jim nodded. "It's weird," he said. "A week ago I was an only child, and now I have an older brother. How does it feel? Scary, but also good. Like a part of me that I didn't know was broken, just healed." I smiled. "Your father would be proud of you." "Really?" "Yes, because you did what he didn't have the courage to do. You faced the truth, and you accepted it." The next morning, Henry took us to breakfast at a market near his house. We ate sausage and egg sandwiches and drank hot chocolate. We walked through the streets of Chicago. Henry showed us the school where he worked, the bookstore where he bought his books, the park where he used to sit and read on weekends. It was like we were building something new, a relationship, a family from scratch. But that afternoon, when we returned to the hotel, I received a call from Mr. Montell. "Mrs. Stewart," he said in a serious voice, "I urgently need to see you. There's something about the will I need to discuss with you before the official reading." A knot formed in my stomach. "What is it?" "I can't tell you over the phone, but it's important. Very important. I'm in Chicago. Can it wait until I get back to New York City?" "No, Mom. It cannot wait. Could you come to my office here in Chicago? I have a branch downtown." I looked at Jim, who was watching me with concern. "All right. What time?" "Can you come now? I'll be waiting for you." "Yes, I'll be there." I asked Jim to stay with Henry. "I want you to spend time together," I told him. "Without me. Just the two of you." "Mum, are you sure?" "Yes, I'll be fine. I'm just going to hear what the lawyer has to say. I'll be back in a couple of hours." I took a taxi to Mr. Montell's office. It was a modern building downtown Chicago. I went up to the fourth floor. The receptionist ushered me in immediately. Mr. Montell was an older man, about 60, with thick glasses and a serious expression. "Mrs. Stewart," he greeted me, indicating that I should sit down. "Thank you for coming so quickly. What is so urgent, counselor?" He opened a folder on his desk. "There's something about your husband's will that complicates things." "What is it?" "Your husband made 2 wills." I froze. 2? "Yes. The first, dated 15 years ago, is the will everyone knew about. In that document, the ranch is divided between you and your son, Jim." 50% for each? "Yes, I know. But 2 weeks before he died, Robert made a second will. And in that will, things change." Mr. Montell took out some documents and placed them in front of me. In the second will, Robert divides the ranch into 3 parts: 30% for you, 30% for Jim, and 40% for Henry Miller. I felt the floor moving beneath me. 40%? Yes, the largest portion. But why? The lawyer sighed. Because Robert left an explanatory letter, a letter that only I was supposed to read in case of disputes. And in that letter, Robert explains that he feels he owes Henry more because Henry lost 47 years, because Henry grew up without a father, because Henry never had the opportunity to inherit anything. I was speechless. "Robert writes," the lawyer continued, reading the letter, "I know this may seem unfair to Jim, but Jim had a life full of love. He had a family, he had a father. Henry had none of that. And I need to compensate him somehow, even if it's with land, even if it's with money. I need him to know he was important, that he always was." Tears ran down my face. "Does Jim know this?" "No, no one knows. Only you. And now you have to decide." "Decide what?" "Whether you tell Jim before the will reading, or if you let him find out that day, in front of everyone." I was silent. "Mrs. Stewart," the lawyer said softly, "Robert also left a special clause. A clause that says if you and Jim decide to renounce your portions, you can do so. And in that case, the entire ranch would pass to Henry." "Robert wanted us to renounce it?" "No, he didn't want that. But he left that option, in case you felt it was the right thing to do." I stumbled out of that office. I took a taxi back to the hotel. The whole way, I could only think of one thing. Robert had left me a decision, the hardest decision of my life. Should I tell Jim that his father had left less to him than to a brother he had just met? Or should I keep silent and let him find out at the will reading? And more importantly, what was I going to do? Was I going to accept the will as it was? Or was I going to renounce my portion so Henry could have everything? When I arrived at the hotel, Jim and Henry were in the lobby laughing. They looked happy, comfortable, like brothers who had known each other all their lives. They saw me enter and their smiles faded. "Mom," Jim said, standing up. "Are you all right? You look pale." "I'm fine," I lied. "Just tired." "What did the lawyer tell you?" "Nothing important. Just details about the will reading." Jim looked at me distrustfully, but didn't insist. I couldn't sleep that night. I stayed awake, sitting in the hotel bed, looking at the city lights through the window. And I thought about Robert, all the decisions he made, all the secrets he kept, all the burdens he left me. And I wondered, how far does loyalty go? How far does love go? How far does sacrifice go? The next morning, I made a decision. I asked Jim to go out to breakfast with Henry. I need to make some calls, I told him. I'll see you in a bit. When they left, I called Sophia. Ellen, she answered immediately. How are things? Complicated. I told her everything. The second will, Robert's letter, the decision I had to make. Sophia was silent for a long time. Ellen, she finally said, what do you want to do? I don't know. Part of me wants to protect Jim, wants him to have what he deserves. But another part feels Robert was right, that Henry lost too much, and he deserves something. And what does your heart say? I closed my eyes. My heart says neither of them should have to lose, that there should be a way for everyone to win. Then find it. And that's when I knew what I had to do. I wasn't going to renounce my portion of the ranch, but I wasn't going to fight for it either. I was going to do something different, something Robert never imagined, something that maybe, just maybe, could heal all of this. That afternoon, I gathered Jim and Henry at the hotel. I need to talk to you, I told them, about the will. They sat across from me with worried expressions. I told them everything. The second will, the 3 portions, the 40% for Henry. Jim was silent. Henry, pale. No, Henry said immediately. No, I can't accept that. It's not fair. It's what Robert wanted, I said. But it's not what I want, Henry insisted. Jim is his son, the one he raised, the one he loved. I'm nobody. You're his son too, Jim said softly, but not in the same way. No, not in the same way, but you still are. Jim took a deep breath. Henry, he said, looking him in the eyes, if Dad wanted to leave you 40%, it's because he felt he owed it to you. And I'm going to respect that. Jim, no. Listen to me. I had everything. I had a father. I had a home. I had love. You didn't have any of that. And even though we're brothers now, even though we're together now, I can't give you back those 47 years. But I can give you this. Henry started to cry. I don't deserve this. Yes, you do. Because you're my brother. And why? Because it's the right thing to do. Then I spoke. I'm also going to respect the will, I said, but with one condition. Both looked at me. The ranch is not going to be divided. It's going to stay together. All 3 of us will be owners, but we're going to work it together, as a family. Henry, if you want, you can move to Texas. You can teach there. Or you can stay in Chicago and come on weekends. It doesn't matter. But the ranch is going to belong to all of us. And no one is going to sell it. Ever. Jim smiled. I like that idea. Henry looked at us with tears in his eyes. Would you really accept me like that? As part of the family? You already are part of the family, I said. You always were. It's just that now we know it. And in that moment, something changed. Something deep. Something I can't explain in words. Because I stopped carrying the weight of the decision. I stopped feeling like I had to fix what Robert had broken. Because I realized something. Robert didn't break anything. He just left something incomplete. And now we were going to complete it. Together. We returned to New York City 2 days later. The 3 of us together. Jim, Henry, and me. On the plane, Henry was sitting by the window, looking at the clouds with that thoughtful expression I was beginning to recognize. Jim, next to him, was showing him photographs of the ranch on his phone. This is the apple orchard, Jim was saying. Dad planted it the year I was born. He used to say that each tree represented a year of my life. Henry looked at the pictures with shining eyes. It's beautiful. It is. And now it's yours too. Henry turned to look at him. I still can't believe it. A week ago, I was a lonely teacher in Chicago. And now I have a brother, a family, a home. Jim smiled. I can't believe it either, but I'm happy about it. Truly. I watched them from my seat, across the aisle, and I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Peace. The will reading was scheduled for the following Tuesday at Mr. Montell's office in New York City. During those days, I focused on preparing the house for Henry. I cleaned the guest room. I changed the sheets. I put fresh flowers on the nightstand. I opened the curtains to let the sunlight in. Henry had decided to stay with us for a week before returning to Chicago to sort out his things. I need to resign from my job, he told me, and pack my books and say goodbye to some people. Are you sure you want to move? I asked him. You don't have to. We can find another way. I'm sure, he interrupted me with a smile. My whole life I felt out of place in Chicago, like I was waiting for something. And now I know what it was. This family, this place. On Sunday, I took Jim and Henry to the ranch in Texas. It was the first time Henry had set foot on his father's land. When the car entered the dirt road, surrounded by cornfields and green hills, Henry was speechless. It's like a dream, he murmured. Mr. Frank was waiting for us at the gate. When he saw Henry, he froze. Good heavens, he whispered. He's the spitting image of Mr. Robert. I introduced Henry. Mr. Frank, this is Henry. Robert's son. Mr. Frank took off his hat, as if he were in front of someone important. It's an honor, young man. A true honor. Henry shook his hand shyly. Thank you, sir. We walked around the ranch for hours. I showed them everything. The main house, the patio with the wisteria, the stone fountain, the apple orchard, the stables, the fields where Robert used to work from sunup. Henry absorbed it all with eyes full of wonder. This is where my father lived, he said softly, as if he were in a sacred place. This is where he worked, where he dreamed. Jim led him to the oldest ash tree on the property. This was his favorite tree, he told him. He said it was more than 100 years old, that it had seen 3 generations of the Stewart family pass by. Henry put his hand on the trunk and closed his eyes. I wish I had known him. Me too, Jim said. But somehow, I feel like he's here, watching us. And I think he's at peace. That night, we had dinner at the ranch house. I made turkey with stuffing, mashed potatoes, green bean casserole, and fresh rolls. Everything just as Robert had loved it. We sat at the big dining room table, the same table where Robert and I had eaten for 38 years, the same table where Jim had grown up. And now, for the first time, Henry was sitting there too. Mr. Frank joined us, and also Sophia, who had come from New Jersey when I told her Henry would be here. It was a quiet, warm dinner, full of stories. Sophia told Henry anecdotes about Robert when he was young. He was stubborn as a mule, she said, laughing. Once he fought with my father because he wanted to plant apples instead of corn. My father said it was crazy that apples didn't grow well in this soil, but Robert insisted, and the next year we had the best apple orchard in the whole region. Henry listened, fascinated. And was he always like that? Always so determined? Always, Sophia said. When Robert wanted something, there was no stopping him. That's why, when he met your mum, she looked at me with tenderness. I knew he was going to marry her, even if my family didn't agree, even if everyone told him it was crazy. He loved her, and that was enough. After dinner, Jim suggested a walk. The three of us went out to the patio. The night was clear. The stars shone with an intensity you never see in the city. We sat on the wicker chairs, next to the fountain. The sound of the water falling was relaxing. No one spoke for a while. We just sat there, breathing the fresh mountain air, listening to the crickets, feeling the peace of that place, until Henry broke the silence. "Thank you." Jim and I looked at him. "For what?" Jim asked. "For welcoming me. For not hating me. For giving me a place in this family even though I don't deserve it." "You do deserve it," I said firmly. "You didn't choose to be born. You didn't choose to be given up for adoption. You didn't choose to grow up without a father. None of that was your fault. And now you have the opportunity to reclaim something that was taken from you. And we are happy to give it to you." Henry wiped his tears. I always wondered why my biological mother abandoned me, why she didn't want me. And for years, I thought there was something wrong with me, that I wasn't good enough, that's why she left me. His voice broke. But now I know the truth. I know it wasn't because she didn't want me. It was because she was afraid, because she was alone, because she didn't have another option. "Do you forgive her?" Jim asked softly. Henry nodded. "Yes, I forgive her." "Why?" "Because she did the best she could with what she had. And because, in the end, she gave me a life, a good life, with people who loved me." Tuesday arrived sooner than I expected. At 10 o'clock in the morning, the three of us were at Mr. Montell's office. It was an elegant place, dark wood walls, bookshelves filled with codes and legal documents, a huge desk. The lawyer received us with seriousness. "Good morning. Thank you for coming." Also present were Mr. Vargas, the lawyer representing Robert's family, and a notary public to validate the reading. We sat down. Mr. Montell opened a sealed envelope. "We will proceed with the reading of the last will and testament of Robert Stewart, dated December 28th of last year." He began to read. First, the formalities, personal data, legal declarations. Then he got to the important part. "In full use of my mental faculties, I declare the following regarding the distribution of my assets." The lawyer paused and looked at us. "The Texas ranch, with all its lands, buildings, and belongings, is divided as follows: 30% for Ellen Stewart, my wife, 30% for Jim Stewart, my son, and 40% for Henry Miller, my biological son." Henry closed his eyes. Jim took his hand. The lawyer continued. "Furthermore, I leave the following provisions. The income generated by the ranch shall be divided equally among the three, regardless of the percentage of ownership. This is so that no one has an economic advantage over the others." I didn't know that. I looked at the lawyer, surprised. He nodded slightly, as if to say, "That's right." "I also stipulate that the ranch cannot be sold or divided for the next 20 years. It must remain as one unit, as a family heritage, and in the event that any of the heirs passes away, their share will go to the other two, never to third parties." Jim smiled. Dad thought of everything. The lawyer continued reading. "I also leave a fund of $50,000 to Henry Miller, as compensation for the years I could not be present in his life. This money is intended for him to establish himself, continue his studies, if he wishes, or invest it as he sees fit." Henry opened his eyes, surprised. "$50,000? "Yes," the lawyer confirmed. But that's too much. It's what Robert wanted, I said, and we're going to respect it. The lawyer continued with other minor details, some bank accounts, personal belongings, Robert's car, and finally he reached the last part. Lastly, I leave a personal letter addressed to my two sons, a letter that only they should read. The lawyer took two envelopes from the folder. One said, "For Jim," the other, "For Henry." He handed them to them. "You may read them now or in private, as you prefer." Jim looked at Henry. "Now." Henry nodded. "Now." They opened the envelopes at the same time. They read in silence. I couldn't see what the letters said, but I could see their faces. Jim was smiling with tears in his eyes. Henry was crying openly. When they finished, they looked at each other and hugged. A long, strong embrace, from brothers. After the will reading, we left the office. The sun was shining in the clear New York City sky. We walked in silence for several blocks until Henry spoke. "Do you know what the letter Robert left me said?" Jim and I looked at him. "It said," he said, "it said he was sorry, that he was sorry for not having been there, that he was sorry for not having known me, that he was sorry for having let 47 years pass without knowing I existed." He wiped his tears. "But it also said that he was proud of me, that the investigator told him all about my life, about how my adoptive parents raised me, about how I became a teacher, about how, despite not having much, I was happy, and that was the only thing that mattered." He paused, and at the end it said, "Henry, I can't give you back the years we lost, but I can give you something. A family, a brother, a place to belong. Use it well, live well, and be happy, because that's all I ever wanted for you." Jim also shared what his letter said. "Dad apologized to me," he said, his voice trembling. "He told me he was sorry for hiding this from me, that he knew it would hurt me, but that he needed me to meet Henry, because Henry was my brother, and because brothers should be together." He turned to Henry, "And he asked me to take care of you, to teach you everything he couldn't teach you, to make you feel part of the family, to be the brother you never had." Henry smiled through tears. "And I promised him," Jim continued, "that I would do it, that I was going to be your brother, not just in name, but for real." They hugged again. We walked to a nearby park, sat on a bench under the shade of a maple tree, and there, in that moment of peace, I realized something. Robert had died, but he hadn't left, because he was in Jim, in his way of speaking, in his laugh, in his kindness. He was in Henry, in his posture, in his eyes, in his shyness. He was in the ranch, in the trees he planted, in the land he worked. He was in us, in our family, and that was more powerful than any will. 1 week later, I received a call from the hospital in Chicago. Madeline had died, quietly, in peace. The nurse told me that in her last days, she had asked about Henry. "Did they find him?" she would ask. "Did they tell him the truth?" And when the nurse told her yes, that Henry knew everything and was with his family, Madeline smiled. "Then I can go," she whispered. "I have nothing left unfinished." And she closed her eyes. Forever. I told Henry. He cried. "I never got to talk to her," he said. "I never got to tell her that I forgave her." "She knew," I told him. "Believe me, she knew." We organized a small funeral for Madeline. Just the three of us, Sophia, Mr. Frank. We buried her in the cemetery in Texas, not far from where Robert was, because even though they were never together in life, in death at least, they could be near. And maybe that was enough. That night, back at the ranch, the three of us sat on the patio, under the stars, next to the fountain, and we talked about life, how strange it was, how things never go as planned, how sometimes the worst tragedies bring the best blessings. I lost my father, Jim said, but I gained a brother. Me too, Henry said, and I gained a family. I looked at both of them, and I lost my husband, but I found the truth, and that made me free. Because that's what had happened, wasn't it? Robert kept secrets. Madeline ran from her past. Henry grew up without knowing where he came from. Jim grew up without knowing he had a brother. And I lived 38 years without knowing the whole story. But now everything was on the table. There were no more secrets, no more lies, only truth. And that truth had freed us all. 3 months later, Henry moved permanently to the ranch. He got a job as a teacher at a middle school in New Jersey. And on weekends, he and Jim worked together in the fields. They planted more apple trees, repaired the stables, modernized the irrigation system, and little by little, the ranch began to flourish again. Not just in production, but in life, in laughter, in family. One day while I was preparing lunch in the kitchen, I heard voices in the backyard. Jim and Henry were arguing about something, but it wasn't a bitter argument. It was brotherly. "I'm telling you the apples should be planted in March," Jim was saying. "And I'm telling you February is better," Henry replied. "I read a study. Studies don't know anything. Experience is what matters. And you have more experience than an agricultural engineer with a doctorate." "I have more experience than you, brother." And they laughed. I watched them from the window and smiled, because there they were, two brothers who never should have met, but who now were inseparable. And I thought of Robert, how in the end he had done something good, something that, even though it was complicated and painful, had united this family. Because life, I realized, always finds a way to balance itself out. Robert hid a secret for almost 50 years, and that secret haunted him until his death. He couldn't tell Henry the truth. He couldn't ask Madeline for forgiveness. He couldn't say goodbye. But he left us. He left us the truth. He left us the opportunity to heal what he couldn't heal. And that was justice. Not a justice of punishment, but a justice of redemption. 1 year after Robert's death, I returned to his grave. I brought fresh flowers, white lilies, his favorites. I knelt down in front of the headstone and spoke. "Robert, I don't know if you can hear me. I don't know if there's anything after this, but if you can, I want you to know something." Tears ran down my face. "I forgave you, for keeping secrets, for not trusting me, for leaving me this burden. I forgave you for everything." I caressed the headstone with my hand. Because in the end, I understood. I understood that you were human, that you made mistakes, that you were afraid, just like everyone else. I smiled through tears. But you also did something beautiful. You united two sons who never would have known each other. You created a family where there was only emptiness. And that is worth more than any secret. I stood up. "Rest in peace, my love, because here everything is all right." And it was true. Everything was all right. Because even though Robert had made mistakes, even though he had hidden the truth, even though he had hurt without meaning to, in the end, life had balanced everything out. Henry found his family, Jim found a brother, Madeline found peace before she died, and I found the strength to forgive and move on, with the truth, with the family, with life. 3 years have passed since I opened that chest in the stable. 3 years since I discovered my husband had kept a secret for almost half a century. 3 years since my life was split in two, and now, sitting on the porch of the ranch house, with a mug of coffee in my hands and the afternoon sun painting the hills orange, I can say something I never thought I would say. I am at peace. The ranch has changed a lot since then. Henry lives here permanently. He converted one of the rooms in the main house into his personal library. It's full of books, from floor to ceiling. Poetry, history, philosophy. Sometimes, at night, I hear him reading aloud, practicing for his classes. He got married 6 months ago, to an elementary school teacher he met in New Jersey, a sweet woman with an easy laugh, who looks at him as if he were the most valuable thing in the world. Her name is Patty, and when I saw her for the first time, I knew she was the one. Because Henry shone when he was with her, the same way Robert shone when he looked at me. Jim comes to the ranch every weekend. He brings Sarah and their 2 daughters, Sophia and Valerie, 2 beautiful girls who run through the fields like he used to run when he was a child. The girls adore Henry. "Uncle Henry," they shout when they see him, "tell us a story." And he sits with them under the old ash tree and tells them stories of Greek heroes, of brave princesses, of dragons who learn to be good. Sometimes Jim and Henry work together in the fields, planting, harvesting, repairing fences, and even though they argue sometimes, they laugh more than they argue. Because that's what brothers do, right? They fight, but they also love each other. Mr. Frank is still the ranch foreman. Even though he's older, he doesn't want to retire. "This land is my life, Ma'am Ellen," he tells me every time I suggest he rest. "The day I stop working here, that's the day I die." And I don't insist anymore, because I understand what he means. This land is more than a place. It is memory, it is family, it is home. Sophia comes to visit us once a month. She always brings food: baked macaroni and cheese, apple pie, chili when it's in season. "So you don't forget to eat," she tells me, even though she knows I eat well. We sit on the patio next to the fountain and talk for hours about life, about our children, about our grandchildren, and sometimes we talk about Robert. "Do you miss him?" she asked me once. "Every day," I replied. "But it doesn't hurt like it used to. Now it's more like a gentle nostalgia, like missing a summer from long ago." Sophia smiled. "He would be proud of you, you know, how you handled all of this, how you kept the family together." "It wasn't just me," I said. "It was Jim. It was Henry. It was you. It was all of us." 6 months ago, we had an unexpected visit. A woman in her 50s knocked on the ranch door. She was tall, with brown hair, her eyes full of nervousness. "Mrs. Ellen Stewart?" she asked. "Yes, that's me. How can I help you?" The woman took a deep breath. "My name is Celia Miller. I'm Madeline's cousin." My heart skipped a beat. "Madeline's cousin?" "Yes, her. She lived with me in Chicago when she was pregnant with Henry, and before she died, she asked me to give you something, but I didn't know where to find you until now." She took an envelope out of her purse. "This is for Henry." I called Henry. When he arrived and saw Celia, he froze. You knew Madeline?" "Yes," Celia said with a sad smile. "I was the only person with her when you were born. I supported her during labor, and I held you when you were a baby." Henry put a hand over his mouth. "Really? Yes, and I want you to know something. Madeline, Madeline loved you with all her heart. Giving you up for adoption was the hardest decision of her life. She handed him the envelope. This is a letter she wrote for you 20 years ago, when she found out she had cancer. She asked me to give it to you if I ever found you. And now I can keep my promise. Henry opened the envelope with trembling hands. He read the letter in silence, and he cried. When he finished, he shared it with us. My dearest Henry, I don't know if you will ever read this letter. I don't know if I will ever find you. But I need to write it anyway, because there are things I must tell you. I'm sorry. I'm sorry I gave you up for adoption. I'm sorry I wasn't strong enough to keep you. I'm sorry I took away your opportunity to know your father. But I want you to know something. I didn't abandon you because I didn't love you. I abandoned you because I loved you too much. Because I knew that I couldn't give you the life you deserved. I didn't have money. I didn't have family. I didn't have anything. And you deserved everything. So I gave you the one thing I could give you. A chance. A chance to have a family that loved you. A home where you could grow up. A better life than the one I could have given you. And I pray every day that that decision was the right one. I pray that you are happy. I pray that you feel loved. I pray that someday you can forgive me. Because even though I wasn't there, even though I didn't see you grow up, even though I didn't know you, you were always my son. And I always loved you. With all my heart. Your mother, Madeline. Henry folded the letter carefully. He put it back in the envelope, and he hugged Celia. Thank you, he said. Thank you for bringing me this. She loved you, Henry, Celia said through tears. Never doubt it. That night, Henry, Jim, and I sat on the patio under the stars, as we had done so many times. You know what the strangest thing about all this is? Henry said. What? Jim asked. That I spent my whole life feeling abandoned, feeling like I wasn't good enough, like my biological parents didn't want me. He paused. But now I know that's not true. Madeline loved me. Robert would have loved me if he had known about me. And even though I didn't grow up with them, even though I didn't have what I should have had, I got something more. What? I asked. I got two families. The family that raised me, and the family that found me. He smiled. And that's more than most people have. Jim put a hand on Henry's shoulder. You know, Dad used to tell me something when I was a kid. He'd say, Jim, family isn't just the people you share blood with. It's the people you share life with. And he was right, I said. Because you two, you are brothers. Not because Robert said so, not because a will established it, but because you chose to be. Henry nodded. And I choose this family. Every day. Forever. The following months were quiet. Good. The ranch produced the best apple harvest in years. Jim got a new contract with a natural juice company. We now sell our produce across the country. Henry wrote a book about the history of Texas, about the legends of the region, about the families who have worked this land for generations. It's about to be published. And me? I started writing too. Not a book, just memoirs for my granddaughters. So that someday, when they are older, they can read this story and understand where they come from. Because that is what I learned in these 3 years, that the truth always comes out, no matter how long you hide it, no matter how many secrets you keep. Sooner or later, the truth finds a way to free itself. And when that happens, you have two choices. You can let it destroy you, or you can use it to build something better. Robert chose to hide the truth, and that decision had consequences. He never knew Henry. He never got to ask Madeline for forgiveness. He never got to explain to me why he hid all of this. But, but he also left us something. He left us the opportunity to heal, to unite, to become a family. And that is priceless. A week ago, Henry sought me out in the kitchen. "Ellen," he said. He no longer calls me Mom, now just Ellen. "Yes, honey? I want to ask you something." "Tell me." "Patty and I are expecting a baby." The world stopped. "What?" Henry smiled with tears in his eyes. "We're going to have a son. Well, a daughter. We found out yesterday." He hugged me. "And we want you to be the godmother, to be part of her life, to be her grandmother." I couldn't hold back the tears. "Really, though?" "Yes, because you gave me something I never had. A mother. And I want my daughter to have the same thing. I want her to grow up knowing you, loving you, knowing you're part of her family." 2 days later, Jim also gave me news. "Mum, Sarah is pregnant." "Again," I laughed. "Another girl?" "No, this time, a boy." He walked over and hugged me. "And we want to name him Robert, after Grandpa." My heart filled with joy. Your father would have loved that. I know. And I want that boy to grow up here, on the ranch, just like I did, just like his sister, just like his cousin who's on the way." He looked around. This land has to stay alive. It has to pass to the next generation, and the next, so we never forget where we come from. And now I'm here, sitting on the porch of the ranch house, watching Jim and Henry work together in the orchard, watching Patty and Sarah chat on the patio, laughing, planning the baby's arrival, watching the girls play with Mr. Frank, who teaches them how to take care of the plants. And I realized something. Robert didn't leave. He is still here, in his sons, in his grandchildren, in this land he loved so much, in this family he built. Sometimes, at night, when everyone goes to sleep and the ranch is silent, I sit next to the fountain and I talk to Robert as if he could hear me. "Look what you did," I tell him. "Look what you left behind. A family, a beautiful, complicated, imperfect, but beautiful family." I smile. "And even though you made mistakes, even though you hid things, even though it hurt me, in the end, it was all worth it." The water in the fountain falls gently, the wisteria moves in the wind, the stars shine in the sky. "Rest in peace, my love," I whisper, "because here everything is all right." And it's true, everything is all right. Because I learned something I never imagined I would learn, that forgiveness is not forgetting, it is remembering without pain. It is looking at the past without bitterness. It is accepting that people are human, that they make mistakes, that they hurt without meaning to, but that even so, they deserve love. I learned that family is not perfect. It is complicated. It is painful. But it is also the only thing that truly matters. Because at the end of the day, when everything falls apart, when secrets come to light, when the world gets dark, family is the only thing left. And if you are lucky enough to have one, you must take care of it, protect it, love it, even if it hurts, even if it's difficult, even if it breaks your heart. I learned that the truth hurts, but it also heals. Because only when you face the truth, only when you stop hiding from it, can you truly be free. And I am free now, free from the weight of secrets, free from lies, free from pain, because I chose to forgive, I chose to love, I chose to move on. If my story helps you, if these words touch your heart, if you identify with the pain, with the betrayal, with the forgiveness, I want you to know something. You are not alone. We all carry secrets. We have all been hurt. We have all had to choose between resentment and forgiveness. And I know it's not easy. I know it hurts. I know that sometimes it seems impossible. But I also know this, that forgiveness is the only path to peace. And that family is always worth it, even if it's complicated, even if it's imperfect, even if it breaks your heart. I am 66 years old now, my hair completely white, my hands full of wrinkles, my body more tired than before. But my heart is full, full of love, full of gratitude, full of peace. Because even though I lost Robert, I gained something more. I gained 2 sons instead of 1. I gained a bigger family. I gained the truth. And I gained the freedom that comes with it. This morning, while I was making coffee, Henry walked into the kitchen. "Good morning, Ellen." "Good morning, honey." "Did you sleep well?" "Very well. I dreamed of Madeline." "You did? And what did you dream?" "I dreamed she was here, at the ranch, walking through the apple orchard, and she was smiling, as if she had finally found peace." He wiped his tears. "And when I woke up, I realized that maybe she did find it, because we are all right, and that was all she ever wanted." That afternoon, we all gathered on the patio. Jim, Henry, Sarah, Patty, the girls, Sophia, Mr. Frank. We celebrated Valerie's birthday, Jim's youngest daughter. There was cake, music, laughter. The girls ran through the garden, the adults talked under the shade of the ash tree, and I watched them, all of them. My family, this beautiful, complicated, imperfect family. And I thought of Robert, how, in the end, he had done something good. He had created life. He had created love. He had created family. And even though he wasn't here to see it, his legacy lived on, in every laugh, in every hug, in every shared moment. When everyone went to sleep, I stayed alone on the patio, looking at the stars, listening to the sound of the water in the fountain, feeling the cool mountain breeze, and I whispered one last prayer. Thank you. Thank you for the pain that taught me to forgive. Thank you for the secrets that taught me to value the truth. Thank you for the loss that taught me to appreciate what I have. And thank you for this family, because in the end, that is all that matters. Thank you for listening to me until the end. Thank you for joining me on this journey. Thank you for allowing me to share my story with you. If this story touched your heart, if it made you think, if it helped you see forgiveness in a different way, subscribe and click the bell icon to hear more stories of women who transformed their pain into wisdom. Every day, a woman, a life lesson. Share this story with someone you love, because sometimes a story like this can change an entire day. May God bless you, and until next time.